Hello students, welcome back to the same chapter. The enemy will be continuing from the page number 29, last sixth line. He will die unless he is operated on, Sadao said, considering. The question is whether he will not die anyway. Sadao commented that if the man was not operated upon, he would die. He added that even if he was operated upon and saved, he would die at the hands of Japanese army. So, either ways, he would die. Hannah cried out in fear. Don't try to save him. What if he should live? What if he should die? Sadao replied. He stood gazing down on the motionless man. This man must have extraordinary vitality, or he would have been dead by now. But then he was very young, perhaps, not yet 25. You mean die from the operation? Hannah asked. Yes, Sadao said. Here, please underline the word vitality means life or energy. So Hannah screamed with fear and asked Sadao not to save the man. She feared that if he lived, they would be in danger. And Sadao questioned that what would be the implications if the man died. He looked down towards the injured man and wondered that he had a lot of energy which had kept him alive through such torture. He countered his thought with the fact that the man was very young. He seemed to be 25 years of age, and at that age people do have a lot of energy. Hannah asked him that did he mean the man could die during the operation? Sadao confirmed her question. Hannah considered this doubtfully, and when she did not answer, Sadao turned away. At any rate, something must be done with him, he said, and first he must be washed. He went quickly out of the room, and Hannah came behind him. She did not wish to be left alone with the white man. He was the first she had seen since she left America, and now he seemed to have nothing to do with those whom she had known there. Here he was her enemy, a menace, living or dead. Menace means danger or threat. So Hannah here was pondering or thinking over this possibility, and as she was taking time to reply, Sadao left the room. He said that something had to be done with the injured man, irrespective of the result. The first thing was to wash him. As he walked out of the room, Hannah followed him. She did not want to remain in the room alone with the white-skinned man. Since she had left America, he was the first white man she had seen. She had no contact with the Americans whom she had met, as they were her enemies. So this injured man was also an enemy and was a threat to them. Then she turned to the nursery and called, Yumi! But the children heard her voice, and she had to go in for a moment and smile at them and play with the baby boy, now nearly 3 months old. Over the baby's soft black hair, she motioned with her mouth, Yumi, come with me. So here the word nursery means a room in a house for the special use for young children. So Hannah turned to the children's room and called out to Yumi, her maid. So as the children heard her voice, she went inside. She gave them a smile and played with her 3-month-old son. As she held the baby, who had soft black hair, she motioned with her mouth to Yumi, asking her to come. I will put the baby to bed, Yumi replied. He's ready. She went with Yumi into the room next to the nursery and stood with the boy in her arms, while Yumi spread the sleeping quilts on the floor and laid the baby between them. Yumi replied that the baby was ready for sleep and that she must put it to sleep before accompanying her. Hannah held the baby and went to the bedroom next to the nursery with Yumi. The governess, that's Yumi, spread the sleeping quilts on the floor and laid the baby between them. Then Hannah led the way quickly and softly to the kitchen. The two servants were frightened at what their master had just told them. The old gardener, who was also a house servant, pulled the few hairs on his upper lip. Hannah led the way. In this paragraph, Hannah led the way as they walked fast towards the kitchen. The two servants were in the kitchen and were scared after hearing what their masters, have told them and regarding the injured man. And the old gardener also worked as a servant, was pondering over the news and pulling he was pulling the hair from his upper lip. Now, the master ought not to heal the wound of this white man, he said bluntly to Hannah. The white man ought to die. First he was shot, then the sea caught him and wounded him with her rocks. If the master heals what the gun did and what the sea did, they will take revenge on us. So here the word bluntly means in a straightforward manner. So in this paragraph, the old gardener spoke very straightforward to Hannah, very bluntly, and he said that Thou must not treat the injured white man. He reasoned out that the man was destined to die. And what reasons he gave? Firstly, he had been wounded by a gunshot, and secondly, the rocks of the sea wounded him further. If Thou healed the wounds given by the gun and the sea, then the gun and the sea would treat them as enemies and seek revenge. The gun here represents the Japanese army and the sea represents the country of Japan. So, if they treated the enemy, they would be punished by Japan. I will tell him what you say, Hannah replied courteously. But she herself was also frightened, although she was not superstitious as the old man was. Could it ever be well to help an enemy? Nevertheless, she told Yumi to fetch the hot water and bring it to the room where the white man was. So, courteously means politely, and superstitious means irrational beliefs. So, Hannah politely said to the gardener that she would pass his message to her husband Sadao, and she was herself frightened, though not very superstitious like the old man. She thought that helping an enemy could never be good for them. Still, she asked Yumi to get hot water into the room where the injured man was kept. She went ahead and slid back the partitions. Sadao was not yet there. Yumi, following, put down her wooden bucket. Then she went over to the white man. When she saw him, her thick lips folded themselves into stubbornness. I have never washed a white man, she said, and I will not wash so dirty a one now. So stubbornness means firm determination. So in this paragraph here, Hannah went inside first and moved the partition to one side, and then Sadao was not there. Yumi, the governess, followed her and kept the wooden bucket on the floor. As she saw the American, the white man, her thick lips folded, and the expressions on her face indicated her determination. And she firmly said that she had never washed an American and that she would never wash the one who was so dirty as this injured man. So Hannah cried at her severely, "You will do what your master commands you." So Hannah reacted to Yumi's refusal. She screamed at her that she was supposed to follow her master's order. Now the paragraph says, there was so fierce a look of resistance upon Yumi's round dull face that Hannah felt unreasonably afraid. After all, if the servants should report something that was not as it happened. So fierce means dangerous, and resistance means the refusal to accept or comply with something. So Yumi resisted here strongly, and here the author, the writer has explained about her face that was dull and had a very dangerous look of protest, okay, which actually scared Hannah. She was worried that if the servants reported something different from what had happened, they could land into trouble. So, what Hannah says, very well, she said with dignity. You understand, we only want to bring him to his senses so that we can turn him over as a prisoner. So, dignity means respect. So, Hannah changed her expressions to respect and said, very well. She actually explained Yumi that they intended to bring the man in a conscious level, and then after coming back to the senses, they would hand him over as a prisoner. Then next line says, I will have nothing to do with it, Yumi said. I am a poor person and it is not my business. Then please, Hannah said gently, return to your work. Yumi said that she was not concerned about their plans, and she added that she was a poor person and it was none of her business to know about their plans. And at once Yumi left the room, but this left Hannah with the white man alone. She might have been too afraid to stay had not her anger at Yumi's stubbornness now sustained her. Sustain means to continue. So Hannah said to Yumi that then she should return to her work, and Yumi left the room at once. And Hannah was again left alone with the white man. And she would have been afraid to remain there all alone, but her anger on Yumi's firm determination made her stay in the room. So Hannah says, stupid Yumi, she muttered fiercely. Is this anything but a man? And a wounded, helpless man? In the conviction of her own superiority, she bent impulsively and untied the knotted rugs that kept the white man covered. When she had his breast bare, she dipped the small clean towel that Yumi had brought into the steaming hot water and washed his face carefully. The man's skin, though rough with exposure, was of a fine texture and must have been very blond when he was a child. Underline the word conviction, which means firm belief. Impulsively means to do something suddenly without thinking. Rugs means blanket, blonde of light color. So she says, Hannah says, with anger, that Yumi was a stupid person, and it was just this man is just an injured person. And Hannah was so full of anger at this refusal by the maid. Yumi that without thinking she opened the blanket and in which the man was injured. His chest was bare. Hannah took a small clean towel, dipped it in the steaming hot water and washed his face. And the man's skin was rough due to being exposed to the sun, but it had a good texture, and he must have been very fair as a child. Then the next paragraph says, while she was thinking these thoughts, though not really liking the man better now that he was no longer a child, she kept on washing him until his upper body was quite clean. But she dared not turn him over. Where was Sadao? Now her anger was ebbing, and she was anxious again, and she rose, wiping her hands on the wrong towel. Then, lest the man be chilled, she put the quilt over him. Ebbing means decreasing gradually. Rose means to stood up. Chilled means freeze due to cold weather. So Hannah kept on cleaning the man's upper body as she had these thoughts. She did not like the man, as he was not a child anymore. She did not have the courage to turn him over and thought of Sadao. Her anger was decreasing and she started becoming restless. She stood up and wiped her hands with the wrong towel, and she did not want the man to freeze due to cold weather, so she put the quilt on him. Now, Sadao, she called softly. He had been about to come in when she called. His hand had been on the door and now he opened it. She saw that he had brought his surgeon's emergency bag and that he wore his surgeon's coat. Hannah called out to Sadao softly in this paragraph, and he had been on the door when she was calling him out, and he opened the door, and Hannah saw that Sadao was carrying his surgeon's emergency bag and was wearing his surgeon's coat also, and he was fully prepared to operate upon the injured man. "You have decided to operate?" she cried. "Yes," he said shortly. He turned his back to her and unfolded a sterilized towel upon the floor of the tokonoma alcove and put his instruments out upon it. Sterilized means disinfected. Tokonoma alcove means, actually the word toko literally means floor or bed. Ma means space or room. English tokonoma is usually called alcove. It is a part of room where things are displayed. A niche or an alcove in a Japanese home for displaying a flower arrangement or other piece of art. So in this paragraph, Hannah asked Sadao that had he decided to operate the man, and he replied that he is firmly decided that he will operate upon him, and he turned his back to Hannah as he did not want her to object to his decision. Then Sadao started his work. He opened a sterilized towel on the floor of the Tokonoma alcove and placed his surgical instruments on it. Then he says, "Fetch towels." Means Sadao asked Hannah to get some towels. And she went obediently, but how anxious now, to the linen shelves and took out the towels. There ought also to be old pieces of matting so that the blood would not ruin the fine floor covering. She went out to the back veranda where the gardener kept strips of matting with which he to protect delicate shrubs on cold nights, and took an armful of them. Hannah obeyed Sadao in this paragraph and went out to get the towels. She was curious as Sadao was operating upon the injured man. She thought that the blood from his wounds could stain the fine mats which covered the floor of the room. So she got some rough mats from the backyard, which were used by the gardener to cover the delicate shrubs from the cold weather. Then next paragraph says, "But when she went back into the room, she saw this was useless. The blood had already soaked through the packing in the man's wound and had ruined the mat under him." "Oh, the mat!" she cried. "Yes, it is ruined," Sadao replied, as though he did not care. "Help me to turn him," he commanded her. She obeyed him without a word, and he began to wash the man's back carefully. So in this last part of this audio, by the time Hannah reached the room, she saw that blood had flowed through the bandage on the man's wound and had stained the mat beneath him, and her effort was futile. On seeing the stained mat, Hannah cried that the mat had been spoiled. Sadao agreed that the mat had been ruined in such a manner which indicated that he was not bothered by it. Sadao ordered Hannah to help him turn the man over, and she obeyed him, and then Sadao started washing his back. "Me would not wash him," she said. "Did you wash him then?" Sadao asked, not stopping for a moment his swift, concise movements. "Yes," she said. He did not seem to hear her, but she was used to his absorption when he was at work. She wondered for a moment if it mattered to him what was the body upon which he worked so long as it was the work, for the work he did so excellently. The word, underline the word concise, which means short. So in this paragraph, Hannah told Sadao that Yumi had refused to wash the injured man, and Sadao asked her that did she wash him. He did not stop cleaning him. He made fast, small, quick movements of his hands as he cleaned him carefully. Sadao was so engrossed in work and did not seem to hear Hannah. Hannah wondered that Sadao was not bothered who the injured man was. He was only concerned in performing his work well. Next paragraph says, You will have to get the anesthetic if he needs it, he said. I? She repeated blankly. But never have I. It is easy enough, he said impatiently. He was taking out the packing now, and the blood began to flow more quickly. He peered into the wound with the bright surgeon's light fastened on his forehead. The bullet is still there, he said with cool interest. Now I wonder how deep this rock wound is. If it is not too deep, it may be that I can get the bullet, but the bleeding is not superficial. He has lost much blood. Underline the word anesthetic, which means a substance that induces insensitivity to pain, superficial, existing or occurring at or on the surface. So in this paragraph, Sadao told Hannah that she would have to inject the injured man with a substance that induces insensitivity to pain. Hannah replied that she had never done that earlier, but Sadao, in a haste, it was very easy, and Sadao was removing the packing. The packing is by packing I mean the sea mosses that he gave when Sadao was not taken into the room. Okay, and now the blood started flowing faster. He looked at the wound with the help of the right surgeon's light fixed on his forehead, and he announced that the announcement he told Hannah that the bullet was inside the man's body. He wondered that how deep the wound made by the rock was, and he said that if the wound was not very deep, then he could get the bullet out. He added that the bleeding was not from the surface of the skin, which meant that the wound was deep and the man had already lost a lot of blood. Then it says, at this moment, Hannah choked. He looked up and saw her face the color of sulfur. Her face the color of sulfur means sulfur is a yellow colored element, and the clause means this is a clause, okay, and this means that her face became pale yellowish in color. So when Hannah saw Sada inspecting the wound, she could not see the sight, and so she coughed, okay, and she was not feeling good about that sight. Sada looked at her and saw that her face was yellowish in color, like the color of sulfur. Then, "Don't faint," he said sharply. He did not put down his exploring instrument. "If I stop now, the man will surely die." She clapped her hands to her mouth and leaped up and ran out of the room. Outside in the garden, he heard her retching, but he went on with his work. Underline the word leaped, which means jumped. Retching means vomiting. So Sadao reacted and ordered Hannah not to faint, and he did not stop his work and continued inspecting the wound. Sadao said that if he stopped, the injured man would certainly die. Hannah put both her hands on her mouth, jumped up, and ran out of the room. Sadao heard her vomiting in the garden, but he continued with his work. Then, it will be better for her to empty her stomach, he thought. He had forgotten that, of course, she had never seen an operation, but her distress and his inability to go to her at once made him impatient and irritable with this man who lay like dead under his knife. So, in this paragraph, as Sadao needed Hannah's help to operate the man, he thought that it would be better for her to empty her stomach so that she would not feel uneasy time and again. And he was reminded that Hannah was seeing an operation for the first time, and it was not a pleasant thing to see. Obviously, Sada was irritated and impatient as his wife was under stress, and he was not able to help her due to the man who lay under his knife. He was just like a dead person. Then it says, "This man," he thought, "there is no reason under heaven why he should live." Unconsciously, this thought made him ruthless, and he proceeded swiftly. In his dream, the man moaned, but Sadao paid no heed except to mutter at him. So, underline the word ruthless means harsh or merciless. Moaned means making it low, soft sounds due to pain. Paid no heed means did not pay attention to. So Sadao thought that there was no reason for him to make efforts to save the man because there was no reason for him to live, and the next thing was that he was an American and he was his enemy. And then Sadao became merciless and started working fast. The injured man moaned in his state of unconsciousness, but Sadao kept on working without paying attention to the man's pain. Groan, he muttered. Groan if you like. I'm not doing this for my own pleasure. In fact, I do not know why I am doing it. The door opened and there was Hannah again. Where's the anesthetic? She asked in a clear voice. Sadao motioned with his chin. It is as well that you came back, he said. This fellow is beginning to stir. She said she had the bottle and some cotton in her hand. But how shall I do it? She asked. Simply saturate the cotton and hold it near his nostrils. Sadao replied without delaying for one moment the intricate detail of his work. When he breathes badly, move it away a little. Underline the sentence and underline the words. Beginning to stir means gaining consciousness. Saturate means wet. So here Sadao said to the injured man that he was free to cry in pain. Sadao was not at all concerned that the man was in pain. He did not want to operate him and did not have any reason for doing so. And at the very moment Hannah entered the room and asked Sadao for the anesthetic which she had to administer to the injured man. Her voice was clear, which shows that now she was prepared to help him. Sadao moved his chin to guide her to the bottle of anesthetic. He added that it was good that she came as the man had started to gain consciousness and it was important to sedate him. Hannah held the bottle and some cotton in her hands and she asked what she was supposed to do. And then Sadao told her to put some anesthetic on the cotton and to place the cotton near the man's nostril. He did not stop his delicate work and added that she should remove the cotton when the man started to breathe badly. She crouched close to the sleeping face of the young American. It was a piteously thin face, she thought, and the lips were twisted. The man was suffering whether he knew it or not. Watching him, she wondered if the stories they heard sometimes of the sufferings of prisoners were true. They came like flickers of rumor told by word of mouth and always contradicted. In the newspapers, the reports were always that wherever the Japanese armies went, the people received them gladly, with cries of joy at their liberation. But sometimes she remembered such men as General Takima, who at home beat his wife cruelly, though no one mentioned it now that he had fought so victorious a battle in Manchuria. If a man like that could be so cruel to a woman in his power, would he not be cruel to one like this, for instance? So underline the word crouched, that means sit in a squatting position. Piteously means causing you to feel sad and sympathetic. By word of mouth means people tell it to each other rather than it being printed in written form. Manchuria is the homeland of the Manchu people. To the Chinese, the region is simply known as the Northeast. Manchuria is made up of China's three northeasternmost provinces. Okay, so Hannah sat in a squat and went close to the face of the sleeping American man. She felt sad and sympathetic towards him as she saw his thin face and twisted lips. She knew that he was suffering. She wondered whether the stories that she had heard about the torture meted out to the prisoners were true. The stories were like rumors which spread when people told them to others. On the other hand, in the printed media, like the newspapers, it was mentioned that the Japanese army was welcomed wherever it went and people praised it for their freedom. Hannah recalled an officer of the Japanese army. His name was General Takima, who was cruel to his wife and would beat her. No one talked about it anymore as he had won the war in Manchuria. Hannah thought that if a man could be cruel towards his wife, then he could also be cruel to the prisoners in his captivity. Then, further, She hoped anxiously that this young man had not been tortured. It was at this moment that she observed deep red scars on his neck just under the ear. So, underline the word scars, which means marks. So, Hannah hoped that the man had not been tortured by the army. Just then, she saw deep red colored marks. It was an injury marks on his neck under the ear. Those scars, she murmured, lifting her eyes to Sadao. But he did not answer. At this moment, he felt the tip of his instrument strike against something hard, dangerously near the kidney. All thought left him. He felt only the purest pleasure. He probed with his fingers delicately, familiar with every atom of this human body. His old American professor of anatomy had seen to that knowledge. Ignorance of the human body is the surgeon's cardinal sin, sirs. He had thundered at his classes year after year. To operate without as complete knowledge of the body as if you had made it, anything less than that is murder. Underline the word probed, which means searched. Anatomy means the branch of science concerned with the bodily structure of humans, animals, and other living organisms, especially as revealed by dissection and separation of parts. Cardinal means basic or first. Okay? So Hannah mentioned the scars to Sadao and asked about them. Sadao did not answer, and at that very moment the tip of his instrument hit something hard. The hard thing was the bullet. It was very close to the kidney. Sadao was not thinking of anything else. He was happy to have finally found the bullet. He moved his fingers inside the wound. Sadao was familiar with the tiniest part of the human body. His professor of anatomy in America had told them that if a surgeon ignored the knowledge of any part of the body, it was the first misdeed that he had committed. To operate upon a body without detailed knowledge of it as much as the person who makes it has would amount to committing murder of that body. So Sadao's professor would repeat these words in his class often. Then, it is not quite at the kidney, my friend, Sadao murmured. It was his habit to murmur to a patient when he forgot himself in an operation. My friend, he always called his patients, and so now he did, forgetting that this was his enemy. So Sadao spoke to the injured man here, and he said that the bullet had just missed his kidney. And when Sadao would get engrossed in the operation like this, he would start talking to the patient. He addressed that patient as my friend. He called the injured man also my friend, and forgot that this man was not a friend but an enemy. Then quickly, with the cleanest and most precise of incisions, the bullet was out. The man quivered, but he was still unconscious. Nevertheless, he muttered a few English words. Underline the word precise means accurate. Incisions means surgical cuts. Quivered means shivered or trembled. Muttered means spoke. So here Sadao was quick. He made a few surgical cuts on the body and removed the bullet. The man trembled in pain but remained unconscious. He spoke a few English words which were an expression of the pain that he was experiencing. Guts, he muttered, choking. They got my guts. Sadao, Hannah cried sharply. Shh, Sadao said. The man sank again into silence so profound that Sadao took up his wrist, hating the touch of it. Yes, there was still a pulse, so faint, so feeble, but enough if he wanted the man to live, to give hope. The word guts means informal word of, for bravery and determination. Profound means very great or intense. Pulse, heartbeat. And feeble means very weak. So in this paragraph, the injured man choked and said, guts. They got my guts. He meant that he was brave and courageous, and the Japanese army would have a tough time while punishing him. Upon hearing him, Hannah cried out to Sadao, and upon that, Sadao hushed her to keep quiet. The man became so quiet that Sadao held his wrist to check his heartbeat. He was checking if the man was still alive. His pulse was there, although it was very weak. Sadao thought that it was enough for a person who had a desire to live. There was still hope. that the man would survive. But certainly I do not want this man to live, he thought. No more anesthetic, he told Hannah. He turned as swiftly as though he had never paused, and from his medicines he chose a small vial and from it filled a hypodermic and thrust it into the patient's left arm. Then, putting down the needle, he took the man's wrist again. The pulse under his fingers fluttered once or twice and then grew stronger. So, vial is a small container, typically cylindrical and made of glass, used especially for holding liquid medicines. Hypodermic means needle, syringe or injection. Thrust means to push. Flutter means to tremble. So he says that Sadao was sure and that he did not want the man to live, and he stopped Hannah from administering anesthetic. He turned quickly and chose a small bottle from the medicines, filled a syringe with the medicine, and pushed the vaccine into the man's left arm. Sadao placed the needle down and held the man's wrist. The pulse shivered once or twice and then improved. Then further, this man will live in spite of all, he said to Hannah and sighed. The young man woke so weak, his blue eyes so terrified when he perceived there where he was, that Hannah felt compelled to apologize. She herself served him, for none of the servants would enter the room. Underline the word compelled, which means forced. Apologize means feel sorry. So Sadao took a deep breath as he told Hannah that the injured man would live. He woke up. His blue eyes, the colored eyes, were full of fright as he realized where he was. And Hannah felt sorry for him. She served him food as the servants refused to enter the room where he was kept. Then, when she came in the first time, she saw him summon his small strength to be prepared for some fearful thing. Don't be afraid, she begged him softly. How come you speak English? He gasped. I was a long time in America, she replied. She saw that he wanted to reply to that, but he could not, and so she knelt and fed him gently from the porcelain spoon. He ate unwillingly, but still he ate. So underline the word gasped, which means to catch one's breath due to astonishment. Knelt means sat on knees. Porcelain, a white vitrified translucent ceramic, also called china, used for making utensils, pottery, etc. So Hannah said softly to the injured man that he should not be afraid. He was actually astonished that she could speak English. Hannah replied that she had lived in America for a long time. The man wanted to speak further but was not able to speak. Hannah fed him gently with a spoon made of porcelain. The man did not want to eat it, but still he ate. Now you will be soon strong, she said, not liking him yet moved to comfort him. He did not answer. When Sadao came in the third day after the operation, he found the young man sitting up, his face bloodless with the effort. Lie down, Sadao cried. Do you want to die? He forced the man down gently and strongly and exclaimed the wound. You may kill yourself if you do this sort of thing, he scolded. What are you going to do with me? The boy muttered. He looked just now barely 17. Are you going to hand me over? As Hannah fed the man, she said that soon he would become strong. She said so despite the fact that she disliked him. The man did not reply to her. Sadao visited the man on the third day, and after the operation, the young boy was sitting, but his face was pale and weak due to the effort that he made while sitting. Sadao screamed at him and ordered him to lie down. He said that the man would die if he stressed himself. Sadao forced him down and inspected the wound that he had operated upon. He scolded the man that he could die if he tried to exert himself. The boy asked Sadao that what would he do with him now. It seemed that the boy was hardly 17 years old. He asked Sadao that would he hand him over to the Japanese army. So, for a moment, Sadao did not answer. He finished his examination and then pulled the silk quilt over the man. I do not know myself what I shall do with you, he said. I ought, of course, to give you to the police. You are a prisoner of war. No, do not tell me anything. He put up his hand as he saw the young man was about to speak. Do not even tell me your name unless I ask it. So Sadao did not reply instantly. He completed examining the boy and then put the silk quilt on him. Sadao said that he himself did not know what he should do with the boy and added that he was supposed to hand him over to the police. He also disclosed that he knew that the boy was a prisoner of war and when he saw that Sadao saw that the boy was about to speak something, he raised his hand to indicate him not to do so. And Sadao asked him not to speak and not to tell his name also unless he asked him to do so. Then they looked at each other for a moment, and then the young man closed his eyes and turned his face to the wall. Okay, he whispered, his mouth a bitter line. Outside the door, Hannah was waiting for Sadao. He saw at once that she was in trouble. Sadao and the boy exchanged glances, and then the boy closed his eyes and turned his face towards the wall. He said okay in a low voice, as he felt bitter by Sadao's words. Outside the door, Hannah was waiting for Sadao. He saw that she was in some sort of a trouble. Sadao, Yumi tells me that the servants feel they cannot stay if we hide this man here any more, she said. She tells me that they are saying that you and I were so long in America that we have forgotten to think of our own country first. They think we like Americans. So Hannah said to Sadao that Yumi told her that the servants would not stay with them if the American man lived there any longer. She also said that Sadao and Hannah had been in America for such a long time that they had forgotten their country's priority. Yumi and the servants thought that Hannah and Sadao liked Americans. So, students, we have finished another part till here. We'll be continuing in the next audio. Thank you.